Craig. Good morning. So with us, we have two leading tech founders set to spill the bean. The question, with all the ideas, money, and power in the world, how does Australia use its exceptional edge to be a global leader in agricultural production and sustainability? We promise you no BS in this next exchange. Two of the star players in the Australian and international agri-tech food and innovation scene. Would you please welcome Justin Webb, the co-founder and Executive Chairman of AgriWebb, and Olympia Yarger, the founder and CEO of GOTERRA. Please welcome them. So Olympia, of course, a renegade founding, transforming food waste management one maggot at a time. Justin, Harvard and Oxford scholar, no less. And I can hardly believe this, ex-international rower as well. We are in esteemed company, the mere mortals on this side.
I'm an ex-rower too, just for St Clair's Girls College. Just because I went to TAFE doesn't mean I can't stand here.
Which TAFE are you an alumnus of?
Illawarra.
Illawarra.
And Cooma, actually.
I don't think Harvard and Oxford.
Someone get John Harvey a weighted blanket, because when I'm on stage, John gets very distressed. Has John got a weighted blanket?
No,
there you are, John. Hi.
I can see it. I can just tell he's just there.
I know.
Now, I want to just begin. We have set this up like a presidential style debate.
Great. Today,
and we're going to keep you to time as much as we can, but I want to begin...
Have you watched many of the presidential debates?
I know. I'm going to start with a comment that Olympia made yesterday on social media. So you referred to a keynote here at Evoke. Nina Schnick was talking about the advancement of intelligence and autonomy, and she provided the example of John Deere, who would have a fully autonomous tractor by 2030, and you said in response, "Tell me Australia doesn't know how good it is without telling me." What was not mentioned is the Australian company Swarm Farm Robotics, which have already achieved full autonomy and are commercial, nor that for every logo represented there's an Australian company who is so much further along. So simply put, what is the challenge and why? Why do you think Australian tech, in your words, are continuously overlooked and under-championed?
I think Justin and I have a bit of a list. We've been talking about this for some time, but I think what that moment in time highlighted to me, and no offence directly to the individual who made the presentation, but we don't actually back ourselves in the way that we talk about. We say back ourselves, but the fact that we had someone come all the way from America to tell us something that was literally like a day late and a dollar short, and I think speaks truly to the challenge of Australia and ag tech innovation. So I'm going to use Swarm Farm because Jossie and Andrew said that I could, and also because I'm gonna. But you look at Swarm Farm Robotics, they are out of Emerald, so they don't meet any of the tech innovation stereotypes. So when you look for pattern matching an investor, you probably wouldn't go to Emerald looking for your next tech startup, and you probably wouldn't expect the archetype of Jossie and Andrew to be a tech innovator or a tech startup, because we believe farmers are largely non-innovative. And yet, here we are with the most, literally, in my opinion, and I know it true to fact, the most advanced on-farm robotics technology company in the world, and who led their last funding round. It was not an Australian company, an Australian fund. And I think that exercise in self-reflection that was given to us in the keynote, inadvertently and accidentally, is sort of what we actually have to start thinking about as Australians in agriculture, because we do not recognise greatness when it's literally sitting in Emerald, and we sure as heck aren't seeing it when it's out there doing all that hard work, and we tend to look over the fence next door or over the pond into the US to look for greatness over there, and I think it's a huge problem.
So Justin, I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think we don't see that greatness? But also, this looking over the pond, is that a cultural cringe, or is that about something else?
Well, I think, firstly, thank you to everyone who missed out on the Taylor Swift tickets and came to this event instead. I know John Harvey had several tabs open, and he's whipping back to Sydney to put on his Swiftie shirt and take the family. I mean, I'm doing it, right? So, I think Olympia's, bang on. When we look across Startup Alley, in fact, when we look globally, the companies that have been founded here in Australia, that have been tried and tested in some of the harshest, most diverse, most demanding agricultural scenarios, they're tempered such that when you do go offshore, when you take it internationally, it's respected. And there isn't another sector that you can say that about in terms of the startup space and the innovation space for Australia. When you found a fintech company here, the market is small, and so therefore you're not really justified and taken as seriously when you arrive in New York. But when you found and scale a tech company that's in agriculture here, and you arrive in the United States or in Brazil or in the UK or in the EU, it's immediately respected as being a world leader. Yet we don't communicate that enough. I mean, look across the audience here. We've got some of the absolute best of the best, yet we don't have the world-leading organizations. And that's no slight on the organizers that are doing this. I actually think that this event absolutely trumps World Agritech. And that's not just because I want an invite again, but it maybe is. But the fact is that we should be having the Cargills, who I know are petering around, but we should have them here in force as the main sponsors. We should have Bayer, we should have Monsanto, we should have the absolute leaders from JBS to Tyson to Tees, the controllers of world agriculture, here, picking up our ideas and proliferating them internationally, rather than us being forced to go offshore to go find funding, to go find proof of concept, and to go find market scaling opportunities.
But we've got to bring them there, right? Like we can't, I think that's again still a challenge. We all go to World Agritech Forum and nobody actually goes to World Agritech Forum.
I mean,
that's kind of the joke.
Event,
it's firstly, it's a really crappy conference. Secondly, you go to World Agri. I've been 3 times, but I don't actually buy a ticket. I just sit in the lobby and speak to investors. That's what going to World Agritech Forum is. But we don't actually, it's true. I didn't know that at first. The first time I bought a ticket, it's like, oh, damn. But the biggest thing, when you think about this event, it's the lie we tell ourselves. We aren't big enough. This industry isn't big enough to be taken seriously. And so we kind of pretend to be the sort of foster kid in the ag world, right? So we're like, oh, America, we did this really cool thing without water. Would you like to take a look? And if you like it, maybe then we're something. Like, that's our attitude in how we engage. We don't walk into a room going, we're here, you're welcome. And we have to get a little bit more, yeah, I know. All of us cringed a little bit at that. But we have to actually get a little bit more like that. We can't keep apologising for doing better with less and then wonder or be curious as to why we aren't getting taken seriously. Americans don't understand that engagement, I know, because I married one and I have to live with it every day. And so when I tell him or sort of detract from my own achievements, he doesn't take me seriously. And Australians do that as a sport, right? And so we've got to turn that off somehow, even if it's by force, and say, we are really, really frigging good at what we're doing. If you aren't at the events that we're at or the conversations we're hosting, it's actually going to be a problem for you. And we haven't actually taken ownership of that part of our excellence. We kind of look at it and we do that humble Australian thing. Yeah, well, we do all right. No, we are doing better than all right. Right? And so we have to really start to figure out ways to turn that off.
Okay, just to bring this to a wrap for a moment, you're using the word we a lot, so let's pinpoint for a moment. If someone could help push that lever and create that change, who would it be?
We. Like this, I think this is something that nobody's really, it's really easy, right? I'm a founder, so I say they, right? And generally when I say they, I'm meaning 2 groups of humans. The big corporates who I want to buy my stuff and don't because I'm too small or kind of sweary, or investors, same reason, but probably in reverse. And so the interesting thing is, we is they and they are us. So I am a founder in the Australian ag tech or deep tech ecosystem, and so I can as easily disengage myself from not great behaviour of investors as I can from my own organisation. I am a participant in the ecosystem, and therefore we is the conversation. So it is all of us. As farmers, we have to do better at saying, I'm really good at my job. and you will pay me accordingly. And finding ways to collaborate within our ecosystems to force that conversation to the table. Justin's got more to say on that later. And then corporates and big organisations and the academics and the RDCs, the other way around. Like, listen and then actually take those insights and make them actionable. But we are they are us. It is together.
Justin, I want to come to scale and growth just for a moment. So Australian startups, should they be encouraged to scale up and grow domestically, or whether it's better to think of us as an incubator and an exporter to Europe and USA?
An incubator?
An incubator.
I thought we were meant to be a $100 billion industry. Like, how big do we want these startups to be?
Yeah.
Like, we should be absolutely growing, world-leading, dominating, unicorn, frivolous, whatever name company you want here. You shouldn't have to go offshore to go find the opportunity to scale. Unfortunately, reality is we do have to go offshore, largely because we're searching for capital. And when we Olympia will walk through some of this through the own trials and tribulations, but there is a gap for the opportunity to get funding when you get scale. So when you're at Series B, C, and D, if you haven't had some of the big four investment from the big four players in VC in Australia from seed, then there's a signaling impact that means once you hit Series B and beyond, you have to go offshore. And if you get investment from an American or European VC, what's the first thing they do? You need to move offshore.
When will you be in America?
Yeah. And so, back to the point, I think there's an enormous opportunity to scale here in Australia. Now, I want to tie back into the we-they piece that my esteemed colleague and
this is the bit where we fight.
I know, we need to get back to this. From the corporate side, that's right, I'm coming after you, corporates. Wander around the startup alley. Look across the Australian ag tech scene, and you see some of the best in the world, both here and the ones that are not here, but genuinely the best in the world. And where or who are the customers of most of those companies? Right? You wander around Startup Alley, they are selling to farmers. Now, farmers, last time I checked, are at the thin end of the wedge of margin in food production. So therefore, the primary producers are being asked to carry the cost and the risk burden of ag tech. And the last couple of days, we've been talking incessantly about sustainability and data and the support and the provenance and the evidence and all of this great stuff. So therefore, you're now asking the farmers to take the price risk, the cost, and the startup risk, the efficacy of the product working, and you're not helping them. Yet you're receiving that benefit through the supply chain. So therefore, I reasonably look at all of the corporates that are staring back at me, a little bit afraid, shrinking in their seats, and say, time for you to step up. It's time for you to accept that you are getting benefit from the farmers that are taking the burden of responsibility of ag tech, that are paying for the checks at the thin end of the wedge. You have to start reaching back. Thank you. Now, before you start freaking out and going, well, no one else is doing this, they are. And I'm sorry they are. And this is one of the barriers, and this is why ag tech is being drained from Australia to go international. I'm so fired up. I've got applause. I'm ready to go.
Get after it. Say the F word.
2 examples.
Because I haven't said vagina yet, and John, he still has all his hair.
There is a trapdoor there, okay? Just wait.
There
got a voice
so
that
there are 2
carries.
examples. One, in the United Kingdom, Sainsbury's and ABP, biggest meat processor in the UK, they've teamed up with us, so self-serving with AgriWebb, to go back and pay the farmer 2 things. They pay for the AgriWebb subscription, but then they also pay a premium per kilogram for the evidence that the meat that is produced is antibiotic-free and has a low sustainability or low carbon footprint, and it is being reduced thereafter. They are getting paid a premium by Sainsbury's. And gosh, can't you imagine? They haven't gone out of business. Can you imagine if Woolies and Coles, oh wait, is it too soon to mention that? But can you imagine if they actually were paying that back and sharing in the benefits? I mean, you add up the profits of Woolies and Coles, again, too soon, but you divide the revenues of Woolies and Coles by the number of farms, $780,000 per farm. Does that seem a little bit unfair? That's me. Burden of responsibility needs to be shared. Second example, McDonald's in the United States. McDonald's has turned around and recognized they have made commitments around sustainability. We will have a sustainable food supply chain. It's not all altruistic, because California came out with a governing law that said, if you do not report on your sustainability metrics by 2026, you cannot sell in California. Quite surprised that we haven't talked about this a lot more at this conference. This is the 5th biggest economy in the world saying, if you do not report on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, i.e. in food, on-farm reporting metrics, you cannot sell in California by 2026. That is a tectonic shift in our industry. Now, McDonald's is paying the rancher for their sustainability evidence data. They are paying them a premium per head of animal produced. That's coming out of their balance sheet. And so I think the takeaway out of this, to come to the end of a very long diatribe, is there are real commercial examples of corporates actually taking the burden of responsibility to connect with the primary production end of the supply chain, commit to connecting with those farmers and ranchers that are in primary production, and actually do it from their balance sheet, and they don't go out of business. It becomes more efficient, more collaborative, and it's a better end result.
And if you watched Four Corners last night, you will, on Monday night, you will have seen...
no, well done.
Brad Bantucci as well, Woolworths CEO, has just resigned this morning from Four Corners. So we've heard from Justin that corporates need to really pull their weight, but who else is slowing down innovation? So what about the RDCs as well? Thinking of others as well, who else are not pulling their weight from your perspective?
Oh, okay. So I think, again, this comes as to how we understand ourselves and what we understand what we're going to do. So for me, when it comes, as a startup founder, the 2 challenges that I've found in sort of nurturing startups in Australian agricultural tech are RDCs and investors. Largely, we only have one sector-specific investment fund in Australia. One. It's Tenacious Ventures, shout out. I'll get my $5 later. But there is only one. But that's a problem. And it means then that the burden of deciding which investments to make are largely coming from funds that have considerable amounts of wealth, but not a lot of knowledge in this sector. And so we've got this huge bottleneck around how do we address this challenge and how do we get ag tech startups to actually get funded in Australia as a first pass. The second, the RDCs, we struggle to understand what it means to value an industry. And so, again, this is the bit where John gets nervous. We put out a paper that said, and again, it's we, because I was part of the industry. I started the industry for insect protein in Australia, and the report came out and it said, catalysing a $10 million industry. Now, anyone in startups knows that if you put a cap on the value of an industry, that's what investors are looking for when they do their due diligence. So any of the investors at the time who were looking at GOTERRA as an investment were calling me and going, how can you be raising 25 million when the Australian government has decided that this industry is worth 10? Right? Now, that was not the intention of that title. That's not what was meant by that. It was like revenue potential or the growth that could be achieved. But because there was lack of clarity or understanding as to what that kind of language meant on a government document in relation to an emerging industry, it signalled a lack of opportunity to international investors. And so, again, this us and them and they and us bit is that we have to actually start listening to each other more, right? So when people are saying to me, hey, Olympia, you've got to figure this out. We can't, do these things with maggots until you've sorted all these sort of growth things out. Fine, that's on me. But I can't then also validate the industry's value to our country as a sole founder of one a startup in this ecosystem. And so that's what we keep asking startups to do. We've created first in the world technology, and then we're asked to A, prove that it should be here, B, get farmers to like it, C, get everyone to validate it. Then we have to find a bunch of investors who understand its value and want to invest in it. And all of that has to be in Australia, or I get international investment, and as Justin says, the next thing they say to me is, when will you be in America? So I'm raising right now, and all of the international investors from the US, that is the number one question about 20 minutes into the conversation. When will you be in America? Do you have American interest? Do you have American customers? That is an absolute distraction from my job. I have to say yes, and I have to have actual evidence that it's true to even engage in that conversation. So if I cannot unlock capital here, I have to now create this business that is like managing a parallel universe of, I hope I can realise the investment here in Australia, or that will allow me to focus on Australia, because not for nothing, it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity that has no other competitors at the moment. Or I have to focus on the US. And if I focus on the US, then that means I do not put my time, energy, or technology to work here, and I will move overseas, and I'll have my kombucha bar somewhere in Idaho, not in Canberra. And frankly, if you've been to Idaho, Canberra's a nicer opportunity. So I think that's where we're getting a bit mismatched, right? So all of this talk of ecosystem, our ecosystem is not as well educated in this space as it needs to be to effectively fund it, and there is a massive gap. Once you get to Series A, and if you're in anything with hardware, which, sorry Justin, most of the hardware startups are in ag or climate tech, that means that you're going offshore for funding. Because unless the big four hit you with your seed round, you're unlikely to get them to join you when you're more expensive in your later round. And the only place to find $10 to $15 million lead checks is Asia, Europe, or America. And so we are forcing our companies overseas with this model. Thank you.
I want to help. I can see Kathy McGowan, the chairperson of AgriFutures. She mentioned last night to me, Minister Watt had a real bounce in his step after going through the whole of Evoke and visiting Startup Alley. And we could help Kathy right now. So very briefly, if you could have an ask right now from the minister, if you were in Kathy's shoes, what would the ask be from a government perspective? I know they're not going to pull all the levers, but what would you ask?
I think they can create incentives to the way they put their funding. So we can literally remove any of the tax penalties for funds on investment into cornerstones or anything like that. We could do a whole range of pieces of work there that just encourage them to do. If we could create a system right now, the big four invest from seed all the way through to the end, which means that you've got a massive amount of investment right at the front, and then only the big four in Australia that can handle you at the end, or PE if you've managed to get to the magical 10 ARR number that everyone wants. But if they would instead collaborate and cornerstone smaller funds, and then they take the B round, so basically I'm a big guy, I'll give you $2, little guy, you do my DD at the seed round because you've got sector understanding, I'll catch that company at the B round and then just give them a tax break on that investment. That's a first pass.
Okay. Justin, what would your ask be for Minister?
Well, look, I think part of the extension, we talked about barriers, or this subject is supposed to be about the barriers and why companies are going overseas. Last night, if you scrolled past the unfortunate news from Woolworths, you might have seen that Rishi Sunak announced at the NFU in the UK a £220 million, which is 425 million Aussie dollar, subsidy purely for the adoption of farm tech and automation on farm. This is for the UK farming industry, which is less than a third the scale of the Australian. Now, we look at the equivalent. New South Wales offered $20 million. South Australia offered 10. It's crazy. So what is the ask? It's recognizing, again, that the adoption and the risk here needs to be shared from government, from corporate, with the burden of that farmer. So that's my ask, is we want this. We want to be able to produce more food. We want to be able to be more productive. We want to be able to be more sustainable, but you've got to give us a hand.
So because this is a debate, you do have a minute left right now. And we will have a Prime Minister by the end of this. You'll get to vote as well. Not really.
My fellow Australian.
So the stage right now. And I really want to come back to the beginning question. So this is your moment to kind of motivate and inspire.
I thought I was doing that.
Oh, you know, you were all the time. You were all the
Shit.
time. You lift the bar. Okay, good. At least you didn't say fuck. That's
No,
good.
I haven't.
How does Australia use its exceptional edge to be a global leader in agricultural production and sustainability? Your minute.
We're already here. And I know it sounds a little bit kumbaya-y, but like all of the problems we talk about, the mechanics of how we get there, are actually solved if we actually just take the willingness of Australians to collaborate, work together, help each other out. Like, we've created an icon of the Australian battler, and we've decided that that's the only way we're allowed to succeed is through force and pain and difficulty and hardship and just surviving. We're not cockroaches. Well, we are, but we're not, that's not who we are, right? We are better than that. We're smart, we're ingenious, we're innovative, we're friendly, we're ridiculously good looking and very clever. And so if we could actually turn all of that into these problems and start championing a little bit better, a little bit more collaboratively, if we actually, everyone calls me a renegade, it's because I'm saying the quiet part out loud. If a few more of you could join me in that endeavour, we actually will move the needle because the noise will be unavoidable. So just that's where we need to start.
Thank you, Olympia. Justin, your minute.
Vote for Olympia. Look, I think that look across the space globally. Regrow, AgriDigital, GOTERRA, AgriWebb, AgWorld. We are already the world leaders in ag tech. So the opportunity to follow that momentum is tremendously exciting. It's exciting for investors, it's exciting for government support, it's exciting for innovators, it's exciting for those that are sitting in the tractor board of the cricket that actually have an idea of how to improve this industry. And moreover, we have the opportunity to sell the ability to produce food in a more sustainable practice than almost anywhere else in the world. So our Brand Australia, is exceptional, and I think we can really lean into it. Now, the one major ask I think that will transform ag tech in particular is also the gender imbalance.
Say it.
75% of the funding in Australia comes from white males. 80% of that funding goes to white males. And if people that look like me don't stand up and say, that's not right, fix it. And it has to be Olympia standing up being like, can you please fix it? That's wrong. So I'm actually saying for us to advance ag tech and genuinely look at this, our buying universe, last time I checked, 50% female. 51. So it probably makes sense that we should have funders looking at founders that are also female.
Very good. Would you please join me in giving a rockstar round of applause to two leading ag tech founders in Australia, Justin Webb and Olympia Yarger.
Thank you, babe. Come on. Take a big fella. Ready? Go this way.